Continuing a double-barreled detective story by Mark Twain. 4 inhabitants. The camp has about 200 miners, 1 white woman and child, several Chinese washermen, 5 squaws, and a dozen vagrant buck Indians in rabbit-skin robes, battered plug hats, and tin can necklaces. There are no mills as yet, no church, no newspaper. The camp has existed but 2 years. It has made no big strike. The world is ignorant of its name and place. On both sides of the canyon, the mountains rise, wall-like, 3,000 feet, and the long spiral of straggling huts down in its narrow bottom gets a kiss from the sun only once a day, when he sails over at noon. The village is a couple miles long. The cabins stand well apart from each other. The tavern is the only frame house. The only house, one might say. It occupies a central position and is the evening resort of the population. They drink there and play 7-up and dominoes, also billiards, where there is a table crossed all over with torn places, repaired with court plaster. There are some cues but no leathers, some chipped balls which clatter when they run, and do not slow up gradually, but stop suddenly and sit down. There is part of a cube of chalk with a projecting jag of flint in it, and the man who can score 6 on a single break and can set up the drinks at the bar's expense. Flint Buckner's cabin was the last one of the village going south. His silver claim was at the other end of the village, northward, and a little beyond the last hut in that direction. He was a sour creature, unsociable, and had no companionships. People who tried to get acquainted with him had regretted it and dropped him. His history was not known. Some believed that Sammy Hillier knew it. Others said no. In fact, Hillier said no. He was not acquainted with it. Flint had a meek English youth of 16 or 17 with him, whom he treated roughly, both in public and in private. And of course this lad was applied to for information, but with no success. Fetlock Jones, name of the youth, said that Flint picked him up on a prospecting tramp, and as he had neither home nor friends in America, he had found it wise to stay and take Buckner's hard usage for the sake of the salary, which was bacon and beans. Further than this, he could offer no testimony. Fetlock had been in this slavery for a month now, and under his meek exterior he was slowly consuming to a cinder with the insults and humiliations which his master had put upon him. For the meek suffer bitterly from these hurts, more bitterly perhaps than do the manlier sort, who can burst out and get relief with words or blows when the limit of endurance has been reached. Good-hearted people wanted to help Fetlock out of his trouble and tried to get him to leave Buckner, but the boy showed fright at the thought and said, "He doesn't." Pat Riley urged him and said, "You leave the damned hunks and come with me. Don't you be afraid. I'll take care of him." The boy thanked him with tears in his eyes, but shuddered and said, "He danced risk it." He said Flint would catch him alone sometime in the night, and then, "Oh, it makes me sick, Mr. Riley, to think of it." Others said, "Run away from him. We'll stake you. Skip out for the coast some night." But all these suggestions failed. He said Flint would hunt him down and fetch him back, just for meanness. The people could not understand this. The boy's miseries went steadily on, week after week. It is quite likely that the people would have understood if they had known how he was employing his spare time. He slept in an out cabin near Flint's, and there nights he nursed his bruises and his humiliations, and studied over a single problem: how he could murder Flint Buckner and not be found out. It was the only joy he had in life. These hours were the only ones in the 24 which he looked forward to with eagerness and spent in happiness. He thought, a poison, no, that would not serve. The inquest would reveal where it was procured, and who had procured it. He thought of a shot in the back in a lonely place where Flint would be homeward bound at midnight. His unvarying hour for the trip. No, somebody might be near and catch him. He thought of stabbing him in his sleep. No, he might strike an inefficient blow, and Flint would seize him. He examined 100 different ways. None of them would answer. For in even the very obscurest and secretest of them, there was always the fatal effect of a risk, a chance, a possibility that he might be found out. He would have none of that. And either society justifies you or, you don't get caught. Those are two things to make sure of one's going to go to certain means. But, of course, make sure it's not murder, Make sure it's not murder or something that you're, doing. Or don't violate the rights of others, Judge such situations as you will. But he was patient, endlessly patient. There was no hurry, he said to himself. He would never leave Flint till he left him a corpse. There was no hurry. He would find the way. It was somewhere, and he would endure shame and pain and misery until he found it. Yes, somewhere there was a way which would not leave a trace, not even the faintest clue to the murderer. There was no hurry. He would find that way, and then, it would be just good to be alive. Meantime, he would diligently keep up his reputation for meekness, and also, as always, theretofore, he would allow no one to hear him say a resentful or offensive thing about his oppressor. 2 days before the aforementioned October morning, Flint had bought some things, and he and Fetlock had brought them home to Flint's cabin. A fresh box of candles, which they put in the corner, a tin can of blasting powder, which they placed upon the candle box, a keg of blasting powder, which they placed under Flint's bunk, a huge coal of fuse, which they hung on a peg. Fetlock reasoned that Flint's mining operations had outgrown the pick, and that blasting was about to begin now. He had seen blasting done, and he had a notion of the process, but he had never helped in it. His conjecture was right. Blasting time had come. In the morning, the pair carried fuse, drills, and the powder can to the shaft. It was now 8 feet deep, and to get into it and out of it, a short ladder was used. They descended by command. Fetlock held the drill, without any instructions as to the right way to hold it, and Flint proceeded to strike. The sledge came down, the drill sprang out of Fetlock's hand, almost as a matter of course. "You mangy son of... is that any way to hold a drill? Pick it up. Stand it up. There, hold fast. I'll teach you." At the end of an hour, the drilling was finished. "Now then, charge it." The boy started to pour in the powder. "Idiot!" A heavy bat on the jaw laid the lad out. "Get up. You can't lie sniveling there. Now then, stick in the fuse first. Now put in the powder. Hold on. Are you going to fill the hole all up? Of all the sap-headed milksops, put in some dirt. Put in some gravel. Tamp it down. Hold on. Oh, great Scott. Get out of the way." He snatched the iron and tamped the charge himself, meantime cursing and blaspheming like a fiend. Then he fired the fuse, climbed out of the shaft, and ran 50 yards away, Fetlock following. They stood waiting a few minutes. Then a great volume of smoke and rocks burst high into the air with a thunderous explosion. After a little, there was a shower of descending stones. Then all was serene again. "I wish to God you'd been in it," remarked the master. They went down the shaft, cleaned it out, drilled another hole, and put in another charge. "Look here, how much fuse are you proposing to waste?" "Don't you know how to time a fuse?" "No, sir." "You don't? Well, if you don't, beat anything I ever saw." He climbed out of the shaft and spoke down. "Well, idiot, are you going to be all day? Cut the fuse and light it." The trembling creature began. "If you please, sir, You talk back to me? Cut it and light it." The boy cut and lit. Great Scott! A 1-minute fuse? I wish you were in... In his rage, he snatched the ladder out of the shaft and ran. The boy was aghast. Oh my God, help, help! Oh, save me, he implored. Oh, what can I do? What can I do? He backed against the wall as tightly as he could. The sputtering fuse frightened the voice out of him. His breath stood still. He stood gazing and impotent. In 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4, he would be flying toward the sky, torn to fragments. Then, he had an inspiration. He sprang at the fuse, severed the inch of it that was left above the ground, and was saved. He sank down limp and half lifeless with fright. His strength gone, but he muttered with deep joy, "He has learnt me. I knew there was a way, if I would wait." After a matter of 5 minutes, Buckner stole to the shaft, looking worried and uneasy, and peered down in it. He took in the situation, saw what had happened. He lowered the ladder, and the boy dragged himself weakly up it. He was very white. His appearance added something to Buckner's uncomfortable state, and said, with a show of regret and sympathy which sat upon him awkwardly from lack of practice, "It was an accident, you know. Don't say anything about it to anybody. I was excited. I didn't notice what I was doing. You're not looking well. You worked enough for today. Go down to my cabin and eat what you want and rest. It's just an accident, you know, on account of my being excited." "It scared me," said the lad as he started away, "but I learnt something, so I don't mind it." "Damned easy to please," muttered Buckner, following him with his eye. "I wonder if he'll tell. Mightn't he? I wish it had killed him." The boy took no advantage of his holiday in the matter of resting. He employed it in work, eager and feverish and happy work. A thick growth of chaparral extended down the mountainside, clear to Flint's cabin. The most of Fetlock's labor was done in the dark intricacies of that stubborn growth. The rest of it was done in his own shanty. At last, all was complete, and he said, "If he's got any suspicions that I'm going to tell on him, he won't keep them long tomorrow. He will see that I'm the same milksop as I always was, all day and the next. And the day after tomorrow night, there'll be an end of him. Nobody ever will guess who finished him up, nor how it was done. He brought me the idea of his own self, and that's odd." Chapter 5. The next day came and went. It's now almost midnight, and in 5 minutes the new morning will begin. The scene is in the tavern billiard room. Rough men in rough clothing, slouch hats, breeches, stuffed into boot tops, some with vests, none with coats, are grouped about the boiler iron stove, which has ruddy cheeks and is distributing a grateful warmth. The billiard balls are clacking. There is no other sound that is within. The wind is fitfully moaning without. The men look bored, also expectant. A hulking, broad-shouldered miner, of middle age, with grizzled whiskers and an unfriendly eye set in an unsociable face, rises, slips a coal of fuse upon his arm, gathers up some other personal properties, and departs without word or greeting to anybody. It is Flint Buckner. As the door closes behind him, a buzz of talk breaks out. The regularest man that ever was," said Jake Parker, the blacksmith. "You can tell when it's 12 just by him leaving, without looking at your Waterbury, and it's the only virtue he's got, as far as I know," said Peter Hawks, miner. "He's just a blight on this society," said Wells Fargo's man, Ferguson. "If I was running this shop, I'd make him say something sometime or other, or vamos the ranch." This, with a suggestive glance at the barkeeper, who did not choose to see it, since the man under discussion was a good customer and went home, pretty well set up, every night with refreshments furnished from the bar. "Say," said Ham Sandwich Miner, "does any of you boys ever recollect of him asking you to take a drink?" "Him?" Flint Buckner? Oh, Laura. This sarcastic rejoinder came in a spontaneous general outburst in one form of words or another from the crowd. After brief silence, Pat Riley Minor said, "He's a 15 puzzle, that cuss, and his boy's another one. I can't make them out, nor anybody else," said Ham Sandwich. "And if they are 15 puzzles, how are you going to rank up that other one? When it comes to the A1, write down solid mysteriousness. He lays over both of them. Easy, don't he?" Is that a reference to the sauce, or what is that? Because, you bet. Everybody said it. Every man but one. He was the newcomer, Peterson. He ordered the drinks all around and asked who number 3 might be. All answered at once. "Archie Stillman." "Is he a mystery, Peterson? Is he a mystery? Is Archie Stillman a mystery?" said Wells Fargo's man, Ferguson. "Why, the fourth dimension's foolishness to him." For Ferguson was learned. Peterson wanted to hear all about him, since everybody wanted to tell him everybody began, but Billy Stevens, the barkeeper, called the house to order and said one at a time was best. He distributed the drinks and appointed Ferguson to lead. Ferguson said, "Well, he's a boy, and that's just about all we know about him. You can't pump him until you're tired. It ain't any use. You won't be getting anything, at least about his intentions or line of business, or where he's from, and such things as that. As for getting at the nature and get-up of his main big chief mystery, why, he'll just change the subject, that's all. You can guess till you're black in the face. It's your privilege. But suppose you do. Where do you arrive at? Nowhere, as near as I can make it out." "What is his big chief one? Sight, maybe? Hearing, maybe? Instinct, maybe? Magic, maybe? Take your choice, grown-ups. 25 children and servants, half price. Now, I'll tell you what he can do. You can start here and just disappear. You can go and hide wherever you want. I don't care where it is, nor how far. And I'll go straight, and I'll put his finger on you. He don't mean it. I just do. Weather's nothing to him. Elemental conditions is nothing to him. He don't even take notice of them. Oh, come, dark, rain, snow, hey. It's all the same to him. He don't give a damn. Oh, say, including fog, perhaps? Fog. He's got an eye. Can pluck through it like a bullet. Now, boys. Honor bright. What's he giving me?" "It's a fact," they all shouted. "Go on, Wells Fargo." "Well, sir, you can leave him here chatting with the boys, and you can slip out and go to any cabin in this camp and open a book, yes, sir, a dozen of them, and take the page in your memory, and he'll start out and go straight to that cabin and point out every one of them books at the right page and call it off and never make a mistake. He must be the devil. More than one has thought it. Now, I'll tell you a perfectly wonderful thing that he has done. The other night there was a sudden great murmur of sounds outside. The door flew open and an excited crowd burst in, with the camp's one white woman in the lead and crying, my child, she's lost and gone. For the love of God, help me to find Archie Stillman. We've hunted everywhere," said the barkeeper. Sit down, Miss Hogan. And don't worry. He asked for a bed 3 hours ago. Tuckered out, tramping the trails all the way he's always doing, and went upstairs. Ham Sandwich run up and roused him out. He's a number 14. The youth was soon... Oh, well, there's where the numbers come from. A youth was soon downstairs and ready. He asked Miss Hogan for particulars. Bless you, dear, there ain't any. I wish there was. I put her to sleep at 7 in the evening, and when I went in there an hour ago to go to bed myself, she was gone. I rushed for your cabin, dear, and you wasn't there, and I've hunted for you ever since, at every cabin down the gulch, and now I've come up again, and I'm that distracted and scared and heartbroken. But thanks to God, I found you at last, dear heart, and you'll find my child. Come on, come quick. Move right along, I'm with you, madame. Go to your cabin first. The whole company streamed out to join the hunt. All the southern half of the village was up, 100 men strong, and waiting outside, a vague dark mass, sprinkled with twinkling lanterns. The mass fell into columns by threes and fours to accommodate itself to the narrow road and strode briskly along, southward in the wake of the leaders. In a few minutes, the Hogan camp was reached. There's the bunk, said Miss Hogan. There's where she was. It's where I laid her at 7 o'clock. But where she is now, God only knows. Hand me a lantern, said Archie. He set it on the hard earth floor and knelt by it, pretending to examine the ground closely. Here's her track, he said, touching the ground here and there and yonder with his finger. Do you see? Several of the company dropped upon their knees and did their best to see. One or two thought they discerned something like a track. The others shook their heads and confessed that the smooth, hard surface had no marks upon it which their eyes were sharp enough to discover. One said, maybe a child's foot could make a mark in it, but I don't see how. Young Stillman stepped outside, held the light to the ground, turned leftward, and moved 3 steps, closely examining, then said, I've got the direction. Come along, take the lantern. Somebody. He strode off swiftly southward, the flies following, swaying and bending in and out with the deep curves of the gorge. Thus, a mile, and the mouth of the gorge was reached. Before them stretched the sage-brush plain, dim, vast, and vague. Stillman called a halt, saying, We mustn't start wrong now. We must take the direction again. He took a lantern and examined the ground for a matter of 20 yards, then said, Come, it's all right, and gave up the lantern. In and out among the sage bushes he marched, a quarter of a mile, bearing gradually to the right, and then took a new direction and made another great semicircle, then changed again and moved due west, nearly half a mile, and stopped. She gave it up. Here, poor little chap, hold the lantern, you see where she sat. But this was in a slick alkali flat, which was surfaced like steel, and no person of the party was quite hardy enough to claim an eyesight that could detect the track of a cushion on a veneer like that. The bereaved mother fell upon her knees and kissed the spot, lamenting. But where is she, then? Someone said, She didn't stay here. We see that much anyway. Stillman moved about in a circle around the place with the lantern, pretending to hunt for tracks. Well, he said presently, in an annoyed tone, I don't understand it. He examined again. No use. She was here, that's certain. She never walked away from here, and that's certain. It's a puzzle. I can't make it out. The mother lost heart then. Oh my God, oh blessed Virgin. Some flying beast has got her. I'll never see her again. Ah, don't give up, said Archie. We'll find her. Don't give up. Well, earlier in humanity's history, there were some of the eagles and condors and stuff were big enough to actually pick up humans. Certainly we find cats and stuff that have, wild cats that have drug off people, but going back millions of years. Some more recent, I suppose, too. Wasn't this one guy spit up by a whale like a couple years ago? Ah, don't give up, said Archie. We'll find her. Don't give up. God bless you for the words, Archie Stillman. And she seized his hand and kissed it fervently. Peterson, the newcomer, whispered satirically in Ferguson's ear, Wonderful performance to find this place, wasn't it? Hardly worthwhile to come so far, though. Any other supposititious place would have answered just as well, hey? Ferguson was not pleased with the innuendo. He said with some warmth, Do you mean to insinuate that the child hasn't been here? I'll tell you the child has been here. Now, if you want to get yourself into as tidy a little fuss as, "All right," sang out Stillman. "Come, everybody, and look at this." It was right under our noses all the time, and we didn't see it. There was a general plunge for the ground at the place where the child was alleged to have rested. Many eyes tried hard and hopefully to see the thing that Archie's finger was resting upon. There was a pause, then a several-barreled sigh of disappointment. Pat Riley and Ham Sandwich said in one breath, "What is it, Archie? There's nothing here." "Nothing? Do you call that nothing?" He swiftly traced upon the ground a form with his finger. "There, don't you recognize it now? It's Injun Bill's track. He's got the child." "God be praised," from his mother. "Take the lantern. I've got the direction. Follow." He started on a run, racing in and out of the sage bushes a matter of 300 yards, and then disappeared over a sand wave. The others struggled after him, caught him, and found him waiting. 10 steps away was a little wickiup, a dim and formless shelter of rags and old horse blankets, a dull light showing through its chinks. "You lead, Miss Hogan," said the lad. "It's your privilege to be first." All followed the sprint she made for the wickiup, and saw with her the picture its interior afforded. Injun Bill was sitting on the ground. The child was asleep beside him. The mother hugged it with a wild embrace, which included Archie Stillman, the grateful tears running down her face, and, in a choked and broken voice, she poured out a golden stream of that wealth of worshipping endearments which has its home in full richness nowhere but in the Irish heart. Hence, part of the reason sharing this during that particular time, right? "I find her by me by, it is 10 o'clock, Billy explained. "She sleep out yonder. They tired, face wet, been crying. Spouse, fetch her home, feed her. She heap much hungry. Go sleep again." In her limitless gratitude, the happy mother waved rank and hugged him too, calling him the angel of God in disguise, and he probably was in disguise if he was that kind of an official. He was dressed for the character. At 1:30 in the morning, the procession burst into the village singing, When Johnny comes marching home. There was a Western my father was watching last night that had that song going. Waving its lanterns and swallowing the drinks that were brought all along its course, it concentrated at the tavern and made a night out of what was left of morning. Chapter 6. The next afternoon, the village was electrified with an immense sensation. A grave and dignified foreigner of distinguished bearing and appearance had arrived at the tavern and entered this formidable name upon the register: Sherlock Holmes. The news buzzed from cabin to cabin, from claim to claim. Tolls were dropped, and the town swarmed toward the center of interest. A man passing out at the northern end of the village shouted it to Pat Riley. His claim was the next one to Flint Buckner's. At that time, Fetlock Jones seemed to turn sick. He muttered to himself, "Uncle Sherlock, that mean luck of it, that he should come just when." He dropped into a reverie, and presently said to himself, "Well, what's the use of being afraid of him? Anybody knows that the way I do knows he can't detect the crime except where he plans it all out beforehand and arranges the clues and hires some fellow to commit it according to instructions. Now there's ain't going to be any clues this time, so what show has he got? None at all. No, sir. Everything's ready. If I was to risk putting it off, no, I won't run any risk like that. Flint Buckner goes out of this world tonight, for sure. Then another trouble presented itself. Uncle Sherlock will be wanting to talk home matters with me this evening. And how am I going to get rid of him? For I've got to be at my cabin a minute or two about 8 o'clock. This was an awkward matter, and cost him much thought, but he found a way to beat the difficulty. We'll go for a walk, and I'll leave him in the road a minute, so that he won't see what it is I do. The best way to throw a detective off the track, anyway, is to have him along when you are preparing the thing. Yes, that's the safest. I'll take him with me. Meantime, the road in front of the tavern was blocked with villagers waiting and hoping for a glimpse of the great man. But he kept his room and did not appear. None but Ferguson, Jake Parker, the blacksmith, and Ham Sandwich had any luck. These enthusiastic admirers of the great scientific detective hired the tavern's detained baggage lockup, which looked into the detective's room across a little alleyway 10 or 12 feet wide, ambushed themselves in it, and cut some peepholes in the window blind. Mr. Holmes' blinds were down, but by and by he raised them. It gave the spies a hair-lifting but pleasurable thrill to find themselves face to face with the extraordinary man who had filled the world with the fame of his more than human ingenuities. There he sat, not a myth, not a shadow, but real, alive, compact of substance, and almost within touching distance with the hand. "Look at that head," said Ferguson, in an awed voice. "My gracious, that's a head." "You bet," said the blacksmith, with deep reverence. "Look at his nose, look at his eyes. Intellect, just a battery of it. And that paleness," said the ham sandwich, "comes from thought. That's what it comes from. Hell. Duffers like us don't know what real thought is. No more we don't," said Ferguson. "What we take for thinking is just blubber and slush." Right you are, Wells Fargo. "And look at that frown. That's deep thinking away down, 40 fathom at the bowels of things. He's on the track of something. Well, he is. And don't you forget it. Say, look at that awful gravity. Look at that pallid solemnness. There ain't any corpse can lay over it. No, sir, not for dollars. And it's hidden by hereditary rights, too. He's been dead 4 times already, and there's history for it. 3 times natural, once by accident. I heard him say he smells damp and cold like a grave, and watch him. There he's got his thumb on the bump on the near corner of his forehead, and his forefinger on the off one. His thinkworks is just a grinding now. You bet your other shirt, that's so. And now he's gazing up towards heaven, and stroking his mustache, slow, and now he has just rose up standing, and is putting his clues together on his left fingers with his right finger. See? He touches the forefinger, now middle finger, now ring finger. Stuck? Look at him scowl. He can't seem to make out that clue, so see him smile, like a tiger, and tally off the other fingers like nothing. He's got it, boys. He's got it sure.